You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. I have a lot of really cool friends who do a lot of really cool things. I wanted to make it a goal to sit down with these friends and spend about 15 minutes or so getting to know them better and find out about their past, present, and their future. The result is this show. My name is Grant Baciocco, and this is 15 Minutes With. Lance Anderson is a performer, a storyteller, and a podcast pioneer. Lance, thanks for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on here. I've been trying for a while
I know
to
you
get
have.
you on here.
Almost a year.
Almost a year. But I'm excited to talk to you. We're going to talk about podcasting because that's mainly where I know you from.
Sure.
But I want to get to know you a little bit better than that. Where did you grow up?
North Hollywood, Studio City area,
Yeah.
Grew up right in the Valley, went to North Hollywood High.
Yeah. And when you were growing up, like even as young as a kid, what was the first kind of, because you're a creative guy, what was the first creative thing that kind of captured you?
A story I actually really like to tell is going to see the movie, the original Rocky in the movie theater, and seeing it, and you know how it was back in those days. You didn't really know about the movies. They would come out. There wasn't Entertainment Tonight or any of that kind of stuff. And we sat in the back of the theater. I was with my mom and her friend, and we were there. I think it was a Saturday night after it had opened on a Friday. It was a Saturday night. Nobody really knew about it. It was this boxing movie or whatever. And I just was just blown away by that movie. And at one point during the movie, during the main fight, the audience jumped out of their seat. They literally jumped out of their seat like they were at a real boxing match. Yeah. And I left the theater just really kind of floating out of the theater. And I thought, I want to somehow do something like that. That was like the first thing that kind of really made me think I wanted to do something creative,
Yeah. So what did you do after you?
I didn't do anything. I was an athlete, I wasn't doing anything, but always thinking, okay, well, I would do some sort of, storytelling or movie. I was thinking maybe an acting or whatever. The first creative thing that I did was actually stand-up comedy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did that for about a year in 1988. Right at it was sort of what we called the comedy bust at that time. The boom had happened.
Right.
We were kind of the Gen Xers trying to get in there and
yeah. But let me ask, because you were an athlete in high school, and you like football, right?
Football and baseball, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times, and maybe this doesn't, I mean, I know they're not mutually exclusive, but like a lot of times there's the athletic people,
right,
and then there's the creative people.
Yeah. And
so what was it like? Like, were you creative during that time, or was it more just
not
sports?
really, but I think I was kind of that, like in the movies where there's the jock guy who's the kind of a little bit more sensitive guy. I was kind of that guy,
right?
I had friends in a lot of different groups, in part because I was able to kind of be with the jock guys, but also I was a bit of a misfit, at least internally, and I was related a little bit more to the people that were weird and oddballs and didn't fit in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were your parents creative at all?
Funny, very funny. Both my parents are very, very well. My mom's deceased, but they very, very funny people, and so I got a lot of that. And we always we saw a lot of movies. We went to the movies a lot, and anytime a Woody Allen movie would come out, we'd see it opening weekend. Now it's a different story with Woody Allen, but at the time in
right.
the 70s, it was In fact, I was an only child, so I had to kind of use my imagination a lot. To kind of entertain myself, but also they didn't really want to pay for a babysitter. It was cheaper for them to take me to the theater with them, the movie theater. So I saw a lot of like adult sort of movies that you wouldn't normally take a kid to. Before I should have probably, but that was we didn't ride with seatbelts back then.
Right.
I mean, it was just different.
Right.
You know how it was.
Right. So after high school, did you go to college?
I went to Cal State Northridge for a brief period of time, and that didn't really work for me. I was actually at the time I was studying pre-law. I think I was thinking I was going to do. So there was a little weird period of time where I was trying to take a more narrow attack to whatever my future was, and then kind of had like a little bit. One could almost say like a nervous breakdown. Kind of had to kind of shed the skin of the athlete guy, because I was thinking about even being a cop and all this kind of weird stuff. And then I kind of became more excited about the idea of doing film or becoming an actor or whatever. went up to Humboldt State for a couple of years and studied film up there, and I did that, and then came home to do the comedy, and then from there, from comedy about a year, then I started getting more involved with the writing and storytelling, and one of my big influences is this guy Spalding Gray.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and after seeing him, that really kind of, when I saw him do Swimming to Cambodia in the theater, I thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do, yeah.
Yeah. I want to touch briefly on the filmmaking. Did you make any films while you were studying?
Little short, small films, but nothing too... one that I think you would like, I made this pixelation film all with socks. I had a lot of socks, and I just had all these socks coming out of the drawer and just taking over the room, and but nothing serious.
Nothing serious.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that helped with your storytelling, right?
It did. The two women ran the program up there at the time, and they really expanded my idea of what a story could be. Also, not just to play things straight, to think in the abstract and all of that. So I think they had a major influence on me, and still do.
Yeah. Well, coming back to Los Angeles, you started doing comedy. What inspired you to try stand-up?
Well, I wanted to do the storytelling because I had seen the Spalding Gray thing already, but there was no infrastructure for storytelling.
Right.
There was definitely an infrastructure for comedy, and I saw in back of the LA Weekly, there was a listing for an open mic at the Valley Improv on Ventura Boulevard. There was a Hilton right there at Sepulveda and Ventura, and they had comedy. The Improv had like a little ballroom that they used. And I started doing comedy there. Did the open mic, and then of course did other open mics, and got out there pretty quickly. I realized that it was not for me because I have always sort of wanted to approach things a little bit more from an artistic point of view, and I felt that comedy was limiting in being able to express myself more artistically, because your main priority if you're doing comedy is to make people laugh. It's not about anything other than making sure that happens.
Right.
Now, you can do it artistically, but that's not the primary focus. The primary focus is to make people laugh. And I felt like that was limiting because my stories I felt were sometimes more serious than just trying to make people laugh. Although, as you know, I do try to use humor in my stories.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So if the stand-up was not going for you, not working the way you want, where did you go next?
From there, I actually went back up to school. I went to Sonoma State for a year. They had a writing program. Went up there for about a year, and it was not a good choice. I think I should have just stayed in L.A. and tried to figure it out. But going up there, I had a couple good teachers, had some good writing classes that kind of did help me along the way. Came back to L.A. and started telling stories at I can't think of the name of the place. It was on... you might even know. It was on Cahuenga there, right across from the Hanna-Barbera. There was a little coffee house there. I can't remember the name of it anymore. But anyways, they had like an open mic there, and that was the first place I started doing storytelling.
Was it Sonoma Blue?
No.
Okay, because that's the one when I first came down. That's when I was.
Yeah, it was it was like a piano bar coffee house. They didn't serve alcohol, but it was an interesting little place, and they had an open mic, and I felt comfortable doing, because it was weird performers there, so I was able to do storytelling there.
And was there
it was about 1990-ish.
Was there a storytelling scene?
No. It really, there really didn't seem to be much of a storytelling scene until maybe in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Even when I started doing podcasting, there really wasn't that much of a storytelling scene.
Right. Right. And how were your stories like? Well, let's ask this. What kind of stories were you telling? I mean, you don't have to tell it a whole story, but like personal stories from your life? Yeah,
personal stories. I think my one story about how my very first girlfriend was too shy to kiss me, but then went on to become an adult film star.
Right.
And when that happened, and when that all kind of fell into place. I realized it had like an automatic story. Like there was just the pieces were there to tell that story. So that was one of the very first ones that I really told. Long form. It was about I told in different formats, but I could tell it from about a half-hour version of it to an hour version of that story, depending on the kind of details I included. Because it was really about a coming-of-age story for me, and then sort of loss of innocence thing.
Yeah. You're performing at this open mic, but were you did you ever book a theater to tell your story?
Yeah, I was working with this guy, and we booked a show on sort of Theater Row there on like Santa Monica. It was actually an art gallery, but we kind of transformed it into a little performance space. And through a friend, somebody from Variety came down and reviewed the show and described me as being on the verge of success. And that's kind of when I started using that term verge a little bit and started thinking about that. It was an excellent review. And it's so funny because that night I was great, and then the very next night the house was packed, and I went up on my line, so to speak. Although it was me storytelling, but it was still I just forgot where I was and just had a really bad performance the very next night. So, that's kind of the way it's been for me. Ups and downs.
Yeah. When because I know that I think this predates podcasting, but didn't you start to record some of your stuff and
I did,
put it out?
Yeah, I did. I did this thing where I was recording my stuff and putting it out on, I think it was Real Audio. Right?
Yeah. The Real Audio player.
Right, Real Audio player, right.
Yeah.
And I could do short 3-minute pieces. I called them shorts, and they were just 3 to 5 minute pieces, and I would put them out there, and I actually was getting a little bit of a following, but of course, as you know, there really wasn't that thing where somebody could subscribe. They had to obviously go back to the site every time to get it. There wasn't really any way to, I guess you could create an email list, but I was just putting stuff on my website and just hoping that people would find it. And then I recorded some of my stories as almost as a demo, and then I had that as this thing. The main story was called "It's Free," and on that demo, it was conceptual because the CD was free, so I would let people contact me through the website, and I would mail them the CD. And strangely enough, a lot of people from Pakistan, this prior to 9/11, were asking for the CD, and then 9/11 happened, and
those orders dropped off.
They did. Yeah.
You also didn't you send, I don't know if it's a copy of that specific CD, but you sent one into This American Life and to Ira Glass.
I did. And they listened to it. They liked it. But they said it was too much like comedy, which was a real slap in the face, because I really was, if you want to insult me, call me a comedian. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's, I know you do comedy. I'm
right. I get what you're saying.
You get what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But, is that somebody did somebody say oh, you should send your stuff in there, or was that you on your own
me on my own? Yeah, there wasn't a storytelling structure. There really wasn't. This American Life, there was no Moth, there was no any of that stuff. Snap Judgment, none of that existed. There was This American Life, and Spalding Gray was doing his thing, and then soon he was no more. But so I just figured, hey, maybe I'd get my stuff on there, and I figured that they would look at these okay, this is just a little slice of some stories. They were each I think there were 3 6-minute stories or whatever. So I figured they would go, oh, okay, this guy's kind of interesting. We'll have him do a longer piece or whatever. And they just kind of wrote it off because I did kind of end the stories with a little bit of a punchline. Not a punchline, but a little zinger or whatever.
All right.
In part because I was doing them live on stage, and that was kind of a cool way to end the story. And I guess my background as a comedian was still there on some level, although I think they're much more than just little comedy routines,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know. I never really learned too much about what the people in Pakistan thought, but
someday you'll get.
Well, it's funny because I had to. After 9/11 happened, the government said, hey, if anything weird has happened to you, if anything, and I actually had a cousin who was working at the Justice Department at that time, and I contacted her. I said, look, I sent these CDs to Pakistan. I thought I was doing a cultural exchange here, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I said, should I contact them? And And she said, yeah, you really should. So I sent, a note to the FBI saying, hey, look, I sent all these to Pakistan. I didn't mean to do anything wrong, but and one of the very first lines in the first story was that how I thought John Wayne was kind of a jerk or whatever because he didn't like Indians and I was part Indian, whatever. And, it was like sending that to the FBI is like sending it to like the John Wayne fan club, So I thought, okay, well, they're going to be watching me from here on out.
Yeah, but nothing ever, you never.
No, nothing ever came out.
I mean, you have a file and they're watching you. There's a black van outside.
Right. I mean, I would guess that they probably did do some sort of investigation on some level, I would think, But yeah, it's not like they contact you. Hey, thanks for getting a hold of us. We really appreciate it. Yeah. It's just pretty quiet.
So you sent a demo to This American Life
and the FBI. Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly.
So when did you first hear about podcasting?
Well, from our mutual friend Dan Class.
Yes.
And he and I go way back. In fact, back to the 90s. I met him at an open mic. He was doing comedy. I was doing storytelling. Blah blah blah. I had him help me direct some stories that I was doing including that story I was telling you about the porn star gal at the place that was known at the time as the HBO Workspace, which was like the big place that you could try to get into to maybe get involved with HBO. I did some shows there, and he was helping me direct and do that. And then he started in 2004. And the minute he started podcasting, he contacted me, said, hey, you got to trip out on this. This is going to fit what you do.
Yeah.
Because he knew I was trying to get my stuff out there, but I was, not having any success. At the time, I was literally living in a basement of somebody's house, just very, working a very blue-collar job, struggling, not getting anywhere with things. And the podcasting thing really was like a ray of light,
Yeah. And, you took to podcasting and you started doing your podcast, Verge of the Fringe, which is still, episodes still come out.
They do.
All these years later. Because that was what, 2004, 2005?
I started 2005.
2005.
I was on my first podcast with Dan in, I think it was around November of 2004.
Right.
One of his first episodes. And then I didn't have a computer at the time. I was broke. And so, but I borrowed some money, got a computer, blah blah blah. By 2005, March 2005, I started my podcast.
Yeah, so it's really really early, and one of the things, that means a lot to me, and I think we kind of joke all the time about how people forget the history of podcasting,
right.
But like. Not only were you found this new thing, podcasting, you jumped onto it, started doing your own podcast, but you also were like a champion of it in that you created the LA Podcasters, which at the time there was nothing like that.
Right.
Right. So talk about creating the LA Podcasters, because that's important, I think.
I saw that there was things happening actually in Orange County. The Orange County Podcasters had already started, and they were going, and I felt that, LA, if Orange County had a group going, LA definitely had to have a group going,
right.
And I felt like, in fact, I was even encouraging Dan to lead it because he's, how Dan is. He's a kind of a polished kind of guy in a way,
Sure.
I thought he'd be a better fit where I'm kind of a little more raggedy. But nonetheless, I took on the job of creating this thing. And I remember the very first meeting, I think it was April 2005 that we met. And everyone at the table said, this is the first time I've been with a group of people and they know what podcasting is.
Yeah.
I'll always remember that. I was like, yeah, okay, we all knew what we were talking about, podcasting, because to everyone else, they didn't know what we were talking about. They laughed at us. They thought we were dumb. They thought that, just everything. So, but yeah, we had a nice little group and it grew for a while. And I think there was a time for 2005 into 2006, maybe 2007, that 2 or 3 years where the LA Podcasters were one of the most influential groups in podcasting in terms of the quality of the podcast, spreading the word of podcasting, doing events like what we used to do at the podcast expo.
Yeah.
I went on that tour of brief tour of England because I had developed some fans in England and they booked some stuff. And one of my proudest achievements is I was on the very first podcast panel at Cambridge University in Cambridge, England. And it was a real honor to be that, because it's, there's going to be better podcast panels, there's going to be better podcasters, blah blah blah, but there'll never be another first. So that's the way I saw it.
Right. Well, I mean, I hope really, I mean, how much it meant to all of us, like for you to lead the charge.
Yeah.
We were all solidly behind you, but I mean, because you put stuff together for the booth at the first podcast expos,
right.
And for several years, and and it was a good group, and we still meet, every once a year,
right.
twice a year,
right.
We still all get together, and it's a good group, that, like you said, it was, back in the early days anyway, there was, Mark Maron has his podcast that has millions of things, but like if, back then we were the Marons of we were. I mean, of the time.
The numbers weren't there for like they are today. People
right.
didn't know about podcasting. They were still learning about podcasting, but we were part of the forefront of getting the word out about podcasting, of creating, how many people have been influenced by Dan's podcast? How many people by you, by even me, some of Kush, Tim Coyne, how many people do a knucklehead podcast like Tres Jefes now?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, really, there was a lot of originators in that original group.
Yeah.
So not to say we were the only people doing it, but certainly we were the group in LA.
Yeah. And Verge of the Fringe still going.
It is.
And I will put a link in the show notes to that.
Great.
But what I also like, because I listen to your show, is
that.
You every once you're not afraid to kind of switch it up a little bit. So you're like, oh, I'm going to try something different for this episode.
Yeah.
Do you like actively think of that when you're producing episodes?
Sometimes I just need something to push me to do it and be creative. And I got really stuck for a while. I thought I wanted to quit podcasting around 2008 or so because as you remember, like the video people got involved with podcasting, and they took away all the air out of the room. The video people who don't even consider themselves podcasters now. You know what I mean? It's really, when people think of podcasting, they think of audio now. But there was a time during that period of time in LA, we were definitely at the forefront of it, where the video people were involved and they were taking all the air out of the room. And I just was burnout. Yeah. And so I started doing this thing where I did this thing called Verge of the Dude, where I would supposedly leave a voicemail message to this guy, this friend of mine, unnamed person or whatever. And I did it because I wanted, how could I make this thing as simple as possible? How could I do this? I can record on my phone, just upload it quickly, don't edit it, just take a picture with my phone for the podcast episode artwork.
Yeah.
I also, one of the things I'm proud about is that I'm one of the first, I'm not going to say I'm the very first, but I'm one of the first people to ever do a new piece of artwork for every episode. Because everyone was like, oh no, you just got to put your logo and you got to work your logo. I was like, no. Actually, I had a guy in England who said, hey, let's do a new piece of artwork every episode. So he was the guy, this guy John in the UK, that was the nickname I gave him, who pushed me to do that.
That's awesome. Well, I hope people go check out Verge of the Fringe, because there's a lot of great stories there. It's really good. As we're wrapping up here, I want to ask, we're friends on Facebook, social media stuff, and I see stuff you post. It seems that creatively, a big influence on you, and I could be wrong. I'm reading your social media stuff, but is music. Yeah. And you are you're really passionate about music and songwriting and stuff. So I just wanted to talk to you about how important music is to you.
Very important. I think probably one of the most influential people on me is Bob Dylan, who obviously just won the Nobel Prize, and I think deservedly so, because I think I know a lot of people don't like Bob Dylan and his voice and this, that, and the other thing, but he's done stuff. One of the things that he does is he feels that an artist should always be in a state of becoming. Like, you should never be like, oh, well, here I am.
Yeah, I'm done.
I'm done. I've made it.
Yeah.
He feels that you should always be reinventing yourself, always trying to do something that challenges yourself, and that's a real inspiration. I never felt that close to comedians. I always felt like that was a weird group that I could never really relate to, but I always related to the musicians. I wish I had become a musician, because I think I really fit with that vibe that they have, and there's a sort of a team player thing that musicians have. Regardless of what dynamics happening outside of the thing, once they get up on stage, they have a common goal to do something and to do it all together and to do it well. Not unlike a sports team, going back to that. So that kind of touches that. So I've used musicians a lot as background for when I'm doing my stories. So, like I say, people from Dylan to John Lennon and the band X and whatever have all influenced me in one way or another.
Yeah. Well, if people want to go check out your stuff online, where can they go?
I think the best is vergeofthefringe.com. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where we'll send people.
Yeah, cool.
Well, Lance, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Lance Anderson is a storyteller and podcaster, and you can check out his stories and podcasts over at vergeofthefringe.com. 15 Minutes With on the GrantCast is a production of Saturday Morning Media and is made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly donation for as little as $1 a month. Huge thanks to Shay Stewart, Mer Lafferty, Jeff Peterson, Dale Gadania, Stephen Staver, Jackie Klimo, Melissa Crawford, Chuck, Matthew Wayne Selznick, Dave Slusher of the Evil Genius Chronicles, Mike Coughlin, Dorothy Baciocco, John D., Kathy Crawford, Brian Greer, Carrie Whitney, Chuck Tomasi, Chris Foster, Stephen Ing, Clinton of ComedyForecast.com, Vicky DeVries, Mike Wobschall, Twitter user Butzingear, a.k.a. Wildcat, Eve Cunning, Mike Hamilton, Gaston Marino, and Reed Loveland. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly donation today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on iTunes. If you have feedback for the show, you can send it directly to me at grant@throwingtoasters.com or get in touch via Twitter, where my username is ToasterBoy. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. The GrantCast is copyright 2016 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Baciocco, executive producer. All rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Elf-Centered is a monthly, completely improvised broadcast from Santa's Village. Join elves Gavin, Beatrice, and Gary as they talk about the latest goings-on from the North Pole. He has a pass to the radio station.
I know, but he's got to go through the security check.
Well, he'll be fine.
Okay.
Gary, drop of a hat, he'll strip down to his jingle shoes.
That's what we're worried about.
Oh.
He's been red-nosed.
Really?
Yes, he has. He
has.
has.
Oh, no.
Well, subscribe to Elf-Centered. Visit elfcenteredshow.com today. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.